Do you want admin powers in your map that you can use to troll players or give special items? Well, today we're building a custom admin abuse system that lets you create an admin panel that lets you control your entire game. I'll show you how to show custom messages, teleport, freeze, and kill players, give yourself special powers, and activate any game event. But first, I want to let you know that we're giving out tons of code and assets completely for free, including all of the code for this video. All you gotta do is join our community, which will be linked below, no strings attached. However, if you are interested in getting a whole lot more value and taking your maps to the next level, then you might want to check out the Map Creator Success Program. It's built to give you all of these scripts, assets, and tools needed to accelerate your success as a map creator and empower you to make any map you want. Also, you get new drops every month, full inclusive guides, a like-minded community, and support for pretty much anything. So, if you're serious about taking your maps to the next level while saving time and money in the process, click the first link in the description and check out the Creator Success Program today. Anyways, let's get right into the video. Alright, so to make an admin abuse system with a control panel, we are going to first go ahead and open up our Verse Explorer and create our Verse script. So I'll add a new Verse file to project, and I'm going to call this our admin panel controller and hit create. Then you want to double click on this to open it up. So with this open, the first thing we need to do is track whether or not a player actually should have admin abuse powers. So I'm just gonna go ahead and clear this out, and I am going to make, we go down here, I'm going to make a player map. So I'll call this our admin abuse player map. And to make a map, you need to put in these two brackets. Inside of this, you put the key, which will be a player, and we'll say each player will have their own logic variable, which will be true or false, whether or not they actually have the admin abuse, and we initialize this with a map. So now that we have this player map where each player will have their own logic value attached to them, we need to actually add the players into this player map because currently it is empty. So I'm going to go under on begin, and I'm going to go through every single player in the play space by getting the play space and then getting all of the players like so. And then underneath this, we will just call an initialize function. So I'll say initialize player, and I'll send it the player. One thing you can't forget to do is also account for players who join not at the very start. So we will get playspace.player added event.subscribe, and we'll subscribe to this initialize player function like so. Now let's go down here and actually create that function that's going to initialize the player. So I'm going to call this initialize player function like so. And inside of this, we want to first check that they're not in the map already because we don't want to initialize them if they're already in the map. So we'll say if not admin abuse player map, and then we'll add our player inside of it like so. So if the player is not in the map, then we need to add them to the map. So I'll say if, and we will set the admin abuse player map for player equal to false. So we'll have players start off as false without the admin abuse enabled. So now we have the player initialized in the player map whenever they join the game. The next thing we need to do is actually make triggers that'll be used to turn on and turn off admin abuse for players. So I will make it editable, and I'll call this enable admin abuse trigger. Type trigger device, type trigger device like so, and we'll make another one called disable admin abuse trigger, and it'll be the same. Also, if you're curious as to what these recommendations are whenever I am writing code, that is GitHub Copilot. I have the pro version. I think it's like $10 a month. Highly recommend it though. It's extremely helpful if you're going to be coding Verse at all. Now that we have these triggers though, we need to actually make sure they do something. So we'll go under on begin and write enable admin abuse trigger dot triggered event.subscribe, and we will subscribe to a function called enable admin abuse. And let's go ahead and do the same, but for the disable admin abuse trigger, we just copy the exact same thing, but we'll subscribe it to a function called disable admin abuse. Now, if we go down here and actually create those functions, I'll call this enable admin abuse. And in this, we receive an optional agent. The reason we do this is because triggers don't have to be triggered by a player. They can be triggered by a player or they can be triggered by nobody. So that means whenever this trigger event is subscribed to this function, it might be a player or it might not be. So you have that optional agent. Though for this trigger, we're pretty much always going to have it activated by a player. So we'll say if the agent is equal to m agent. So this basically just converts the optional agent to a normal agent that we can actually use in different stuff. Well, then all we need to do is just set the player map the same as we did here. So I'll copy this if statement like so, except we'll change this out for a player. We'll change our player out for this agent, and you'll see we get an error here, and that is because we need to convert it to a player first. So I'll just write player and then put brackets around agent like so. So what this does is just make sure that the agent is a player because our player map takes in player as a key. A lot of the times you can use agent and player in the same spots, just not in this scenario. If you want to know the difference of the two, they're pretty similar. The only difference is this can actually only be a real Fortnite player. An agent can be a guard or a creature or something like that. But instead of setting false here, we will set it to true. And that's all we need to do. Now let's just copy the exact same thing. Disable admin abuse, takes in an optional agent of type avoid. We convert it like so. And then we set the player map to false because they will no longer have admin abuse. Now we just have this very simple system that is going to enable or disable admin abuse for each player, which is just going to be a logic variable now. That doesn't actually do anything. So let's start making our control panel that will actually do something, and we'll use this player map. Also, before we actually get into creating the panel, all you want to do is you can connect these triggers to anything you want anyway to enable this admin abuse. But normally, if you just want to activate this for yourself, then you probably want to use a pin pad code that you hide somewhere in the map. I'll have a tutorial by MaestroShark linked in the description where you can find a completely free pin pad device that you can use in any map. Anyways, now let's actually create the panel. So first, we'll just create an open admin panel trigger. You can connect this to like a button device in game or even an input trigger, a remote device. It could really be anything, but we will go down here and write open admin panel trigger dot triggered event dot subscribe to open admin panel. Now let's just go down here. I'm going to go and minimize these functions because we no longer need them. And I will write open admin panel, type m agent, and we don't need to return anything. Then I'm going to go ahead and get the agent just like we did earlier by converting the optional. And now I can also minimize this initial player function. So what we need to do here is create and add the UI to the player, but we don't actually have a UI to create. So let's go down here, and I like to go ahead and just create a completely custom class that I will hold all of my UI parts in it. So I'm just going to call this my admin panel class. I'll make it a class like so. And one thing that I do like to do is make a admin panel controller device variable. We'll call it and we'll make it of type our creative device up here like so. Then this way we can have access to our main creative device. So any editables that we end up putting in here, we can directly reference inside of this class by going through this device. Now inside of this, I am going to make a function called add UI, and we will take in an agent, and we don't need to return anything. So we'll just return void. Inside of this, I will say if first we need to get the actual player. So player for our agent, and then we will get the player UI of that player by doing player UI is equal to get player UI for our player like so. You might get an error here, and that's because you need to use a new library. You just have to add that up here. So just hover over the error, copy the using section, and paste it up here with the other using sections. So now that we have the player UI, we can actually add a UI, but we don't have any UI to add. So let's go ahead and start making our UI elements inside of our class here. First, I will make a variable, and I'll call it our main panel canvas, and this is just going to be a canvas that we're going to put all the other widgets inside. Before I actually go ahead and create any more, I would like to go ahead and make kind of a mock-up slash template widget blueprint that I can then use to kind of determine what I actually need to add here in the UI. So to do that, I'm going to go back into UEFN, go to my content browser, hit right click, user interface, widget blueprint, user widget, and I will call this our mockup admin panel. Then go ahead and open this up. The first thing you need to do is drag the canvas panel, which is what we already created in the verse device here. Then we can start adding our other widgets from the left here. I'll start with an image. So I'll drag an image on the screen, go ahead and center it, both anchors and alignment. And then I will make it a little bigger. And I'm just going to make this black. You can use your own custom images if you want, but it's normally you're the only one who's going to be seeing it, so it's not that big of a deal. I'm going to make the opacity 0.5, and to really center this, we'll make the positions 0, and then I'll set the size here. We'll make this pretty large so we have plenty of room. So I'll do like 1800 and maybe 900. Not the full size of the screen, but pretty close. What else do we actually want to add inside of this? Well, there's a lot of different controls we want. The very first thing that I want to add in here is basically a list of all the different players in the game that we can actually do different things for. So for our list of players, we're going to need a stack box. So I will grab a stack box, place it down on the screen, and just the same as our background, I'll center it with the alignment and anchors. And then I'm going to position this where I want my list of players to be. So we'll say our actual list of players is going to be on the right side of the screen here at 0, and we'll say maybe like 500, and we'll say the size is going to be 700, 800. Now inside of the stack box, we want to make the orientation vertical because we want the players to be listed up and down. And then we'll add our first canvas panel, which will be for a player. You'll see it's positioned here, and it doesn't really have a size because it's a canvas panel until we add another widget. So let's go ahead and add what will be our player name to that canvas panel by drag and drop. Make sure it's under the canvas panel and not under the stack box, like so. This I am also going to center just so that we make sure all of our widgets are centered. It doesn't need to be. You could technically probably align this to the left, but it'll make it easier whenever we're copying and pasting canvas slots in Verse. So now that we have this, I will change the size to 40, just so there's kind of a little extra room for each canvas slot. And this will be the player name. So for example, we will write Map Academy. That's the player name. Then we want some different buttons that we can activate for this player. So let's go ahead and grab a button loud and drag it underneath this canvas panel. Same as before, we will center it. Except here, I'll change the position to 0 so that it is centered. And we want to go ahead and increase the size a bit. So we're going to make our one button, and I'm going to go ahead and place it all the way here on the right side. And I will just call the text of this button to something like activate. And let's make sure it's a little bigger so they can fit the entire text. And we know that the text size is 40, so let's make sure the button size is also 40. And I'm going to set the position to 200, so it's on the very right side. Just like that, we have the player name and a button to activate whatever we have selected for that player. So now that we have this set up, which, you know, if we add multiple canvas panels to, like if I copy that, go to the stack. Like if I copy this and go to the stack box, you can see if I continue adding them, we can see all of our players. We need to actually create the different things that we can do for these players. So I'm going to start with being able to trigger any trigger for the player. So what I'll do is actually just go ahead and go to copy this entire stack box, click on our main canvas panel and paste it, and then kind of move it where I want it to be. Honestly, we might end up running out of space. So what I'm going to do is go back to my original image and just make this 1920 by 1080. We want the panel to take up the entire screen. Then we'll be able to move this stack box over a little bit, and I'll also move it up so it's kind of in this corner here. Now inside of this, we don't actually need the text, so all we need is the button. Let's go ahead and make sure this is centered, and then we'll go ahead and shrink this. Also, actually, because we only have the button, I'll just put the button in the stack box and remove the canvas panel entirely. Then we can go ahead and kind of shrink this until it's about the size of our button. And we'll place this over here and kind of make it the full length of our thing so that we can have a bunch of different triggers that we can select. I might shrink it a little bit so I have some room here at the top. And now if we go ahead and do the same thing, we can add extra canvas panels and it'll be extra buttons like so. So how this will work is we'll create basically a different trigger and we'll put a name. And for every single trigger that we create, we will have another option here that we can select, and they'll all be called their own names, something like trigger 1. And if we select that, then select the activate button for any player and it'll trigger that trigger for that player. Now let's go ahead and add a text block here. And this is what we'll use to display what we are currently selected. So we'll just place this right here in the center and we'll change the text to something like currently selected, like so. Also change the justification to center. So this is what we'll use to know what we actually have selected, whether it's a trigger or something else. Now let's go ahead and add the something else. So I'll drop a trigger down here, change the alignment and anchors, kind of position it about the size that I want, do a little bigger than our other buttons, but we want to be able to fit 2 so that we have plenty of space. So I'll just copy that. That looks good. And we'll go ahead and make all of the different mechanics that we want. So we'll have a button that will teleport to, so we can teleport to a player. Then we have teleport to you, so have that player teleport to you. Then let's go ahead and copy this again. We'll call this one our freeze, so this we can like freeze a player. We'll do this again and we will say kill. And then we need 2 more, one for toggle invis, one for flight on, and another for flight off. Then we'll copy this again and we will do invis on and invis off. And then I want to add one more player, and then I want to add one more button, and that'll be an activate for all. So this will activate for all players rather than just the player that we select activate for. So now we actually want to go ahead and create that inside of our admin panel class. So we already have the main panel. Let's go ahead and make the background. I will make a variable and I will call this the background color block. If you want to make this an image block, you'll use a texture block instead, but I am going to make it a color block like so. And here we can actually just go ahead and add our values. So I'll say the default color is equal to black and the default opacity is equal to 0.5. Next up, let's go ahead and work on our players. So for this, I'm going to first make the stack box. I'll call this our player stack box, type stack box like so. And here we want to change the orientation is equal to orientation dot vertical like so. Then inside of that, we have our canvas panel, which will have the text block and the button. So for this, we'll actually create another new custom class, and I will call this our player select class like so. We'll make it a class the same as before. And inside of this, we will have a player, and you can't actually initialize the player. So I will just make it a default value like so, rather than a variable. And then we also need a player name text, which will be a text block. We don't actually have to initialize this. So I could just, we don't actually have to initialize this, but I am going to, so I can go ahead and we don't have to initialize this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And then we also need an activate button of type button loud. Then we just create an array of these. So I'll call this our player select classes, and it'll be an array of player select class. And we initialize that with an empty array. There's actually one more thing we need, and that is the canvas panel for that. So I will also go ahead and create that. I will write our player canvas like so. Next up, we have the triggers, which I'll go ahead and do. Again, we just need to copy what we already kind of have here. We'll create the stack box, except we'll call this our trigger stack box. And instead of our player select classes, we'll call this our trigger select classes. And then we'll go ahead and make our trigger select class like so. And in this, all we need is the trigger device that it'll actually be assigned to, the trigger canvas, and then the activate button, type button loud. If you want to change the button type, you can do that, and that is fine. Then we'll make sure this is an array of trigger select classes and not player select classes. Next, let's go ahead and do all of our other buttons. And actually, we'll do this text first. So we'll just create a text block called var currently selected text of type string is equal to, not of string, of type text block is equal to text block. And here we will write the default text is equal to, and I'll just write, I will put NA because there's just no text originally. However, we get an error here, and that's because it needs to be of type message. So in order to create a message type that we actually assign it to, we'll just call this, we'll have to go and create it. So I'll go up here and call this our NA text. And we will make sure this localizes, because you have to do that if you are making a message, and it'll be of type message, and we'll initialize it with whatever we want. So in this case, it'll be NA. And then here we just replace this like so. What else do we want? We want the default text color to be white. And then we can also change the text size or anything else, but I'm just going to leave that as it is. I don't think you actually need to do the default text color, because I think as the default, if you don't assign it, it is already white, but we'll leave it like that anyway. Next up, what we need is all of the buttons. So I will call this our var, and we'll start with the teleport to button. So I will call this teleport to button of type button loud, like so. And we'll set the default text to whatever we want. In this case, is equal to button loud, like so. That is all we need. I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this, like so. Teleport to button, or teleport to you button. Now let's copy it again. And I'm going to go ahead and actually do all this, and then I'll just cut to whenever I'm back and I've created buttons for all of these 6, as well as for the activate for all. All right, so I went ahead and created all the buttons, and I actually added a couple more. So let's go ahead and add those to our mockup UI. First off, I moved the kill down here, and I'm going to copy our freeze, because we also need an unfreeze button. Kill can stay here, but we also need but we can also go ahead and add an invincibility on, and the same thing, but invincibility off. That allows us to toggle our own or other players' invincibility, which is pretty nice. And then I also added the activate for all button. So now they are all created. We can actually go ahead and add all of these and set them all up in the add UI function. So we'll start by adding our background. So we want to get our main panel canvas dot add widget, and we are going to add a canvas slot. And inside of the canvas slot, we need to add a widget, which in this case, we'll start with the background. So our background color block, like so. And then we need to add everything else that is part of a canvas panel. So if we actually select our background, this is a canvas panel slot here. So we should copy over all these values. First is the anchors. So I'm going to write anchors, and you assign anchors to a type margin, and you assign anchors to a type anchors, like so. And then inside of anchors, you have a minimum and a maximum. Both are vector 2s. So we will say our minimum is equal to vector 2, where the x is equal to 0.5, the y is equal to 0.5. That's going to be the center, just like we have it in the script. Then we just set the maximum as well. Gonna go and copy that. You just say maximum is equal to vector 2, and we also want 0.5, 0.5. Next is the offsets, and that's going to be equal to a margin, and that's going to be these values, except they don't have the same names. So the position X is going to be the left value, which is going to be 0.0. The position Y is the top value, which is 0. The position right, if we go ahead and look, we have that set to 1920. And the size for the Y is going to be 1080. And that's our offsets done. Now we have to do the alignment. So let's go ahead and make that. That is going to be a vector 2. And we had that centered. So X and Y are both 0.5. We also want to make sure to disable size to content. So we'll set that equal to false. And boom, just like that, we now created this canvas panel. We can also do a Z order. So I will assign that. And for this, because of the background, we'll say it is 0. If you don't know what a Z order is, it is kind of like the layer that it's on. So the background, we want to be at the very bottom, which is layer 0. Everything else we'll make as layer 1, so it's above it. But boom, that is the very first widget that we added to our canvas panel. And now what we need to do is copy and paste this. But because we're going to have so many of them, I am going to just shrink this a little bit. So for our canvas slot, the only things that we really need to extend out that we're going to change, because our anchors are going to be the same, is the widget and the offsets. So everything else can kind of stay there. I will move everything else in the same line as this canvas slot, like so. It is going to be a very long line, but we're really not going to touch it much more. And make sure to put a comma at the end of this. And then also you want a comma here. So because once you add one comma, you need a comma in between each different kind of selection here. Then I can also go and copy this line, paste it down here. And now we've shrunken the amount of lines that this actually takes. It does the exact same thing, but whenever we copy and paste this, it's just going to be a lot cleaner. So let's go and actually now copy and paste that. We'll make our second canvas slot. Inside of this, I am going to go and scroll and change the Z order. It's the only time that we'll have to change the Z order as long as we copy and paste this properly from now on. Also, I forgot to copy this section because we also need that. So I'll go and paste that here. And now we just need to add our next widget. So we have the player stack box. Let's go ahead and add this. I will select the stack box and then copy over these values. So we have 575 for the left. Top is going to be, I'm actually just going to go and minimize this. Top is going to be -100, and then it is 700, 800. So -100, 700. And then lastly, let's change the widget to the player stack box, like so. Okay, now we can go ahead and add all of our select classes to the stack box, but I'm going to do this after I go ahead and set up all of these widgets. So let's go ahead and copy, select the trigger stack box, and then go take these values here and plug them into my verse values. So -763, top is 30, then we have 300, 925. And just like that, we have that added. Now let's go ahead and copy this again and do all of our other widgets. There's quite a few, so I'm gonna go ahead and do them all, and then I will be back whenever they're done. But you just want to go ahead and add all of these buttons and this text. All right, so I went ahead and created every single one of our buttons. As you can see, the next thing that we need to do is go down here and actually kind of initialize all of these buttons. The next thing we're gonna go do is go ahead and set up both of our stack boxes. So for the players, what we're going to do is go through every single player in get play space dot get players. But if you see, if we go and add this like so, we're gonna get an error, and that's because one, we can't access player because we already have a player. So I will just say player in game. We'll change the name of this one, but then we have another error, and that's because we cannot actually get the play space from a class like this because this is not actually inside of the play space. So what we'll do is get our verse device, which is this creative device, and that is going to be in the play space. So what we can do is copy this, which is the reference to that device, and write the controller device dot get play space. And now it lets us do that. So now for every single player in the game, what we're going to do is create a new player select class. So we will say new player select equal to like so, and then we need to initialize this with certain values. And if we look, we need the player, so we'll say it's initialized with the player in game, like so. And then we need everything else, so I'm just gonna go ahead and copy all of these and go back down here, and we actually align everything properly. We'll just say player canvas is equal to a canvas, player name text is equal to a text block, and the activate button is equal to a button loud, like so. So then what we need to do is add both this player name and activate button to the player canvas and initialize both of them. So we will say player canvas dot add widget, and we're just gonna go and copy one of these canvas panels that we already have. So let's actually go and copy that, except change this to the player canvas again, but we don't actually have access to it. We need to do the new player select dot player canvas. And we'll add widget, the new player select dot player name text. And then we just need to plug in these values. So if I go ahead and select my text, I'll do the same thing, plug in these values. So I'll be back once I've done that. Okay, so now that I have that, let's go ahead and actually copy that one more time, except we need to actually add the activate button. So I'll just copy and paste this here. Also, they copied weird, so let's make sure that the canvas slot is after, like so. It should still work either way, but this is going to look a little cleaner. And then we just need to change the position here. So I'll select that and copy over all of these positions, and I'll be back once I've done that. All right, just like that, we now also have the button added. So then we can go ahead and add both of those to, or add this player canvas to our main stack box. So we'll go down here and write player stack box dot add widget. And here, because it's a stack box and not a canvas, we need a stack box slot. And the widget will be the new player select dot player canvas. Then we can add some extra values, but we didn't actually change everything, so it should just be default values as fill horizontally and vertically, but we may need to go back in and actually change that later. The next things we need to do is actually go ahead and add the values that we want here. We want to set the actual text of this text block along with the button loud. For the player name, we're going to need to convert an agent to a message, and for the text of the button, we're going to convert a string to a message. So let's actually go ahead and make two functions for that. I'm just going to write message and press tab, and you'll see it creates a string to message function for me. That is because I have a special extension that has little snippets that you can use like this. If you don't have that, or if you want to install it, it is called the verse language snippets. I'd highly recommend. If you don't want to install that, then you can just copy and paste this function here. Next, we also need an agent to message function. So I'm just going to copy the entire thing, except here we can take in an agent like so and return the agent. So now we can just go and use both of those. So I'll go down here and we will say the player name text. And inside of this, the default text is equal to agent to message, and we'll send it the player in game that it gets assigned to. And in here, the default text is equal to string to message, and we will call this select. You could do activate if you want to match it with our widget blueprint, but select is going to be a little shorter and will work just fine. Then the last thing we need to do inside of this is make sure that our activate button actually does something. And if we just do activate, or the new player select dot activate button dot on click dot subscribe to, let's say, like selected this player, well, it's going to send you if we look at on click, it's going to send you a widget message. And if we find widget message, which is not going to be here, it gives the player and the widget that triggered it. But it's not going to give us the actual player that this was selected for. We won't know. So what we want to do instead of this is actually spawn a function, and we'll call it the track player selected button. And then we will send this our entire new player select. Then we can go down here and create that function. So I will call this the track player selected button, and we will take in the player selected class, so new player select of type player selected class, and make sure it suspends, and we don't need to return anything here. And then inside of this, we need to make a loop where we get the button. So new player select dot activate button dot on click dot await. And we're still getting an error here. I'm not sure why. So I'm going to sleep for 0.0 so we can see. It's because we have the wrong name for the player selected class. So it should be player select instead of selected class. Now we should be able to get rid of the sleep, and this will work perfectly. So now every single time the button for this player gets pressed, it's going to so now it's going to loop and wait for this button to be pressed every time. And whenever it is pressed, we're going to call a function, and we'll call it the handle player selection. So we'll call this handle player selection, and we will send it the new player select and we'll send it the new player select.player because we only really need the player. We don't need the information inside of that. So let's go down here and create that function called handle player selection, and we'll take in the player like so. And for now, we will put a block here because we'll come back to this later. There's a couple more things we need to do inside of this, and that is we want this to not stay subscribed whenever the UI is closed. So what I'll do is make a race like so, make my first block and put this loop inside of that, and I'll race it with something else. So I'll put another block, and we need a custom event. So I'll go up here and I am going to write event, press tab, that's another snippet, and it'll create an event for me. I'm going to call this the UI closed event. Now I can go down here and actually await that. So UI close event dot wait. And you see we don't actually have access to that, and that is because these need to be tabbed over once so that they're inside of our admin panel class. And boom. Now, whenever this UI close event is signaled, this loop will also stop awaiting. If we don't do that, then every single time the player opens the UI and presses the player select button, it'll trigger this again because this is still running whenever the first UI got closed. So now our entire player and game stack box is set up, so we can go ahead and move on. Let's do the triggers next, except we don't really have something to go through a for loop here like we do for all of the players in the play space. So I'll go up here and we're going to make a new class, and I'll call this our admin triggers, and it'll be a class. This is going to be concrete because we're going to have editables inside of it, and inside of this I will make an editable, and I'll say the selected trigger type trigger device like so. So this is the trigger device that's actually going to get triggered whenever this is selected for a player, and then we'll just have the name of type string like so. Then we need to make an array of these inside of our main device. So I'll make an editable, and I'll call this our admin triggers. Also, I'll change the class name to admin trigger rather than triggers. And then I'll make this an array of admin trigger like so. Now we have these admin triggers. We can go down here and make a for loop just like we did for the players. Call this admin trig in the admin panel controller device dot admin triggers. So this will go through all of those trigger devices. And then just like we did before, we're going to create a new class, except for let's go ahead and paste this and go up here, and we'll make sure it's a trigger select class, which is going to have a trigger, a canvas, and a button. That's it. So let's go back down here. We'll change this to new trigger select like so. Doesn't need a player, but we do need a trigger, and that's going to be the selected trigger like so. And if we go back up here, what are the other two things you need? The canvas and the activate button. So I'll just go ahead and remove this, the name text, and we'll call this the trigger canvas instead. And now all three of those are initialized. All we need to do is add this button to the trigger canvas. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll copy the same way as we did up here, except we'll change this to the new trigger select dot trigger canvas, and we'll add the new trigger select dot activate button, the same as earlier. Then we can just select this button and copy all of these values. So 0, 0, 340, perfect. And then here, instead of for the text, we're actually going to go ahead and set the text to the admin trig dot name. So admin trig dot name like so. And now all of those are going to be set up and added. We do need to go ahead and add it to the stack box. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll copy this. We'll change this to the trigger stack box. Make sure it is the new trigger select dot trigger canvas like so. Then just like we track the player selected button, we're going to spawn a track trigger selected button, and we will send it the new trigger select. Basically the same thing as we did here. So let's go ahead and just copy this entire function, paste it up here, and then like so, separate it out a bit, change the name like so, change what it's taken. So it'll be the new trigger select of type trigger selected class. And then here, we just change this to new trigger select instead of player select, and the same for here. But instead of handling the player selection, we will handle button selection, and we will send it the new trigger select dot name. Now let's go down here and make that function. So I will write handle button selection, new name, type string is equal to void. And for now, we will block inside of this as well. However, all we actually need to do inside of this is go up here and get our currently selected text, and we'll paste it down here, and we'll write dot set text, and then we'll write string to message so that we have it as a message, and put the new name. So it'll assign the text for the currently selected text. Also, we have an error up here, and that's because in our trigger select class, we don't actually have a name. So what we can do instead is actually get the activate button, because that'll be set to the name, and we'll do dot get text, like so. Pretty handy that they have this get text function already built in. Now we also want to actually go in here and also set our array of trigger select classes. So we'll add it to the new one that we just created. So I'll set the trigger select classes plus equal to array new trigger select, like so. We didn't do this to the players because honestly, we don't really need the players to be saved. So I can actually just go and remove that. So now both the player stack box and the trigger stack box are completely set up. What we now need to do is all of our other buttons, but these should not take near as long. So what I will do is copy my teleport to button, go down here, paste it, and write dot set text, and we'll do string to message, and then write whatever we want the name for this to be. So we'll just call this the teleport to, and then we do this for all the other buttons. So let's go ahead and actually minimize some of this stuff, like so, because we don't actually need to add any more. Actually, before I minimize all of these, there's one more widget that I kind of forgot to include. So I'll add that quickly. If we go to our mockup, I will make another button. I'll just copy this activate one, put it down here, and this will be the close button. So for that, let's go and do the same process as everything else. So we'll just copy the activate button. I'll call it the close button, and then go down here, copy our add widget for the activate button, change it to the close button, and then we just need to change the position or the left position, which should be -220. Perfect. Now we can minimize these, and we have the close button also added. So now we just add all these texts. Next, we have the teleport to you button dot set text, and we'll do that. And then I'm just going to do the same for all of the other buttons, and then I'll be back once that's done. All right, so now I have all of these assigned to texts, and now we want all of these to subscribe to something, but we want to make sure that they're canceled whenever the UI is closed. So I'm going to add a spawn here, and I will write track all buttons, like so. And you don't actually need to send it anything. So now let's go ahead and make this called track all buttons, and it'll suspend. And then let's go ahead and copy this race like so, like we have in our other function, because it already has the closed event. But now we just need to basically add this, but for all of our other buttons. So the teleport to button dot onclick dot await, and then we'll send the handle button selection, the teleport to button dot get text. And now we literally just do that for all of them. So block, loop, teleport to you button, handle button selection, and we'll set it the teleport to you text. Now I'm going to copy this, but for every single one of those, except for the activate for all and the close button. So I'll be back once I've done that. All right, so I went ahead and added all of the basic ones. Now let's do the same for the other two. So let's copy this, and instead we'll do the activate for all button. But instead of handling the button selection, we'll say for every single player in get play space dot get players. Also, to get the play space, as we know from up here, we are going to need to get the controller device dot play space, and I'll say new player. And then we want to make sure that the new player is not the player who has this opened. So for that, we'll go ahead and get the message from the click, and that returns two things as we checked earlier. So we'll write message.player. So this will make sure it activates for all players besides you, and then we'll just call our activate function. So handle player selection, new player, like so. Now let's copy this again, but instead we don't need to do all of this. We just need to close the UI. So I'll change this to close button, and we will write handle UI close, and we'll send it the message.player. Also make sure this is closed, not closed. Then go down here and we'll create that function, handle UI close, player of type player, and return void. We'll block and add this later. All right, so now all of our button subscriptions are set up, and they should close and stop subscribing whenever the UI is closed. So we can go ahead and minimize this function as well. Now what we need to do is actually make it so that whenever a player is selected, it does whatever is written in the currently selected text. So to do that, we're just going to compare all the string values. So I will write the selected text is equal to the currently selected text .get text. So this will be the string that this is currently set to, which should be the same string as whatever button that is set to. So now we just need to compare it to basically all of our other buttons. So I will write if selected text is equal to, and we'll do our teleport to button .get text, like so. And you see this has a no rollback effect, so we can't put it inside of an if statement. So either we could put it above, which you can do, but I'm actually just going to copy this right here, this string, because that is going to be quite a bit easier, and replace it. You just have to make sure that this is the exact same as what you set the text to up here. Then we just need to add the logic here that's actually going to teleport you to that player. And to do that, we're going to actually need access to the admin player as well. So I will also add another thing that this function requires called the admin player. And for that, that'll be whoever presses the button. So I will get the message from the click event here, and we will send it the message.player, comma, the new players, the actual selected player, like so. And we have one more error. If we go and drop down here, it's going to be right here, message.player, the same as we just did. Now we can minimize this again. So now to teleport to the player that is selected, we're going to need a teleporter device. So I will go up to our main device and add an editable main TP type teleporter device, or I'll copy our admin panel controller device. So the admin panel controller device dot main TP dot teleport to, and we need to teleport to or I'll actually just call this the selected players so that it's a little easier to understand. We need to teleport to this selected player, and that means we need to get the 4 character. So what I'll do is actually just put it up here so we don't have to end up repeating ourselves. All right, if our admin FC is equal to the admin player dot get fort character, comma, selected FC is equal to selected player dot get fort character, and you'll see we get an error, but that's going to get fixed because another extension that'll automatically do that, but you should just need to include fortnite.com/characters. Then we can go down here and put everything else underneath that. So I can just do selected FC dot get transform. Boom. And we're going to get an error because this is a function that decides, so we need to put it in an if statement, or we can say and I'll say print teleport failed. Then we just actually teleport using this teleporter. So we'll say dot teleport, and we'll teleport the admin player. Now let's copy this again, and we'll go if selected text is equal to teleport to you. Then we basically do the exact same thing, except instead we want to teleport the teleporter to the admin player's position, or the admin for characters position, and then we want to teleport the selected player instead. Next up, we have the freeze. So if selected text, or I'll just go ahead and copy this, and we'll change it to freeze. So if it's going to freeze that player, then we will write selected FC dot set dot put in stasis, and you need stasis args for this. So I'll just write stasis underscore args, like so. Now let's copy this again, except we need unfreeze. So if we look up here, we have it. So the only first letter is capitalized. So unfreeze, and we'll do selected FC dot remove from stasis, like so. And if we look, it's actually called release from stasis. So let's go ahead and change that. Next up, we have kill. So let's go ahead and copy this. It's equal to kill. And then we will just write selected FC dot damage 10,000. Make sure that it's kill. Make sure that the player is killed. Then we'll write if selected text is equal to flight on. Let's double check that that text is correct. Yep, we have flight on. Then we're going to need to change the player's flight to a different, or we need to change the player to a different class. So I'll write here, I'll call it my flight class selector type class selector device, like so. It's called class and team selector device. So we'll change that. And then I'll also copy this and change it to non-flight class selector. Then we can go back down here and write admin panel controller device dot flight class selector dot change class selected player. Now we do the exact same thing. Let's copy this, go down here, and it should be flight off, and make sure it is the non-flight class selector. If you want to use teams instead, just change these to teams and have it change the team in the class selector device. Next is invisibility and invincibility. So I'm going to go ahead and add those. Invisibility on. We will set the visibility to false, except it's not set visibility. Instead, it is dot hide, like so. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for off. And we will show the for character. Now let's do the same thing, but in vulnerability. We go up here, it is invincibility. So invincibility off and invincibility on. Then said we're not going to be hiding and showing. We're going to be dot set vulnerability is equal to false, and set vulnerability is equal to true. No, not is equal to, but you just put true in the function. That's invincibility done. So that's all of our kind of core buttons. Now we just need to do the admin triggers. So we need to go through the trigger select classes. If I say for every single trig in trigger select classes, we'll say the trigger text is equal to trig.get text, or trig.activate button .get text, and we'll then check if the selected text is equal to the trigger text, and then we just activate that trigger by triggering it for our selected player. And then also, if you want to increase performance by a little bit, you can go inside of each of these and write return, so that once it checks, then it will cancel, or you can actually just do else ifs. It kind of does the same thing. You just write else for each of these, except it's not really going to work for the for loop here, and return will. It's only a minor amount of performance that you're increasing it by, but it can't hurt. But yeah, just like that, we now have the actual player selection and all of the logic for that handled. All else we need to do is actually add the UI and be able to close the UI. So in our add UI function, we're not actually adding this UI to the player yet. So I will just simply write player UI.add widget, the main panel canvas, like so. And we need it to take the player's input. So I will write a comma. We need to then add our player UI slot. And inside of this, we need to select the input mode. So the input mode is going to be the UI.input, the UI input mode dot all. So this will make sure that it actually takes the player or takes control of the player's mouse. Then for the handle UI close, we will say if, and we need to get the player UI. We already have the player, so we can remove this section, and we'll write player UI dot remove widget, and we will remove the main panel canvas, like so. And also don't forget, we need to signal this close event. So let's go down here and go UI close event dot signal, so that it cancels all of our races. So boom, just like that, we now have a entire admin panel that's going to be added or that the player can access. Actually, we need to go ahead and go to our open admin panel function and actually add what we need in here. So we will create a new admin panel class. So I'll say new admin panel is equal to admin panel class. And then we just write new admin panel dot add UI and we'll send it our agent like so. And we can go and expand this stuff as well. I'm pretty sure that is all that we actually need to do. So let's go ahead and test this out in game. I'll go into UEFN and build verse code, then drop down my admin panel controller. Inside of this, we first need to enable the admin panel with a trigger device. So I will throw down a trigger device. I'll call this my enable admin panel. And we need a button to connect to this. You don't need it, but it's going to be nice so that we kind of know what it's doing when we're in game. We'll call this our enable admin panel button. We'll add the text to this as enable the admin panel. And then go down here and select our trigger. Make sure that this is triggered from the button. Now let's go and actually copy these two together. And these will be the disable. So we'll change the names on these like so. Make sure you also go into the button and change the text. Then lastly, we're going to need an open admin panel button. So open admin panel button, or that's not this, the trigger. Then we'll do the open admin panel button for the button, and we'll change this to open like so. Then inside of our device, let's select all of these, the enable, the disable, and the open. Then we have our admin triggers. So I will select two different triggers here. I'll copy this trigger and we'll call this our trigger 1. And what we want this one to do is, I mean, you can connect this to literally anything you want. You can have custom events, you can increase luck. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can have it so it spawns a different custom character on you or anything like that. However, I am going to just make it display a HUD message device. So I will throw down a HUD message device here. I'll call this our, I'll just leave it as HUD message device. Doesn't really matter. I'll change this to triggering player, 3-second or 2-second display time. And the text I'll just say is hi. Then I will have this show from our trigger here. Now let's go ahead and copy this trigger for our second trigger. And what we can do with this is I'll just maybe add a speed boost. So I'll get a movement modulator device, throw it down. Inside of this, I will change the effect duration to like 5 seconds. Speed will be 2x. And I don't think I need anything else, but I will make sure that this is activated from our trigger, like so. Now inside of this, we can go into our admin triggers, select the first one, and I'll just say display high. And then the second one, we will say speed boost. And that's the only two triggers we'll make now, but obviously you can make as many as you want. Next, we need a teleporter device. So I'll grab out my teleporter, throw it down. I'll call this my main TP, change the group and the target group to none, and disable the visibility of the rift. I think that'll be good for now. You can change some other settings if you want, but I'll go and select that. Next is the flight class selector. So I will get a class selector device like so. And then we also need a class designer. So this one for the class designer, we'll do class slot 1, and I'll search for flight and enable it. And then inside of the class selector, enable class slot 1. Then I will copy both of these, except this will be class slot 2. Same for this. And this will have flight disabled. Now we can go back into our device and select both of our class selectors, the flight and the non-flight. One last thing I'm going to do is actually grab an input trigger device, throw it down here. And what I will do is change this to maybe, well, I'll keep this as interact. I'll change this to like swap quick bar. I'm not sure what button this is, but it's definitely one of them. We'll change the text on HUD to open admin panel. And for the require registered, I'll change this to require what registered. So it does, you do actually have to be registered to have it. And then we'll register this whenever the admin panel is enabled. We will unregister whenever it is disabled. And then we'll go to our open admin panel trigger and we'll open this whenever this input trigger is pressed. This allows us to just kind of open the admin panel anywhere. All right, now I'm going to go and launch a game with another account and test this out. There's actually a couple more things that I kind of missed. Let's go ahead and add those. So first off, we're not actually checking if the player has admin abuse turned on. So let's go ahead and do that. When we open the admin panel, we will say if the, first we need to get access to their player map. So I'll say if has admin abuse is equal to admin abuse player map player agent, like so. And we'll say if they actually have admin abuse, then it will actually open the UI. And then inside of this, we also need to send it our admin panel controller so that it actually has access to all the devices that we select. So we will say the admin panel controller device is equal to self. All right, now let's go ahead and test this out in game. Also, make sure that you clear both of these triggers and that they're not being triggered from the admin panel button. I'm also going to go ahead and actually increase the size of all of my buttons because they're currently all a little bit small and they don't fit the entire text. So I'm going to do that. All right, so now if I go ahead and start the game, you'll see that if I go over here, I try to open the admin panel, nothing's going to happen because I don't have the admin panel enabled. If I enable this, you can see on the left side, the input trigger gets added. And if I open this, we have the entire admin panel. I can go and close this. And if I disable it, again, now I can't. Let's enable it. And I can just press Q to open this up. And inside of this, we have all of our different options. So we can teleport to, and it'll select it here. And then we can teleport to either of the players. Map Academy is the account that I'm currently on. Matt Codes is the other one in the lobby. So I'll just select and I get teleported to them. Now, if I go over here, press Q again and say teleport to you and select Matt Codes, they get teleported to me. Very nice. I can freeze myself if I want. Boom, now I'm frozen. I need to unfreeze myself so that I can move again. I can also go ahead and enable flight. So you can see it switches a class. I can now fly around, but if I turn off flight, boom, I can't. I can also do that for every other player. I can turn on invisibility and turn it off. I can also turn on invisibility for all players, and you'll see it'll do every player besides me, but I will make my other player invisibility off. I can kill any player, so I can kill myself or I'll kill my other player and you see they get eliminated there. I can turn on or off invincibility, and then we also have our custom triggers. So I can display high to everyone, and it won't do myself, but if I select myself and select high, then you'll see it gets displayed on my screen. And we can also give myself a speed boost. So just like that, now I have a 2x speed boost for the next 30 seconds. You can add as many of these as you want. You can also add extra like specific buttons if you want to add those to the code manually. So yeah, that's all you need to know to be able to make a custom admin panel that you can use to troll players in your game. Don't forget to check out Map Academy's Creator Success Program in the description below. And if you enjoyed this tutorial and want more systems like this, make sure to leave a like, drop a comment with what you want to see next, and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.